The air in the briefing tent at Forward Operating Base Erebus tasted of grit and stale coffee. Colonel Madsen paced before a flickering projector screen, his shadow a restless predator. He was a man carved from sharp angles and loud confidence, his voice a tool to hammer subordinates into shape. He pointed a thick finger at a slide showing a column of green icons, all neatly aligned. "Operational readiness is at 100%, he declared, the statement hanging in the air, both a boast and a threat. "That is the standard. That is the only standard. We are the tip of the spear, and the spear does not get to be dull." In the back row, a figure sat perfectly still, almost blending into the shadows cast by the humming generator. She wore the uniform of a specialist, her rank a single, unassuming chevron on her collar. Her name tag read Vance. She looked to be in her late 30s, with a face that held no particular expression. Her posture relaxed but not slumped. She was an anomaly, a temporary attachment from a rear echelon unit, sent forward to assist with pre-deployment inspections. To Madsen, she was little more than a piece of administrative friction. He glanced toward her, his eyes sweeping past without truly seeing her. "We have a visitor from Divisional Logistics," he announced, the title dripping with condescension. "She's here to verify our readiness. To check our boxes." He gave a tight, humorless smile. "Let's make sure she has nothing but full boxes to check. Give her whatever she needs, let her see our perfect record, and send her on her way. We have real work to do." A few junior officers, eager to mirror their commander's attitude, offered faint smirks. Vance's expression didn't change. She didn't react to the dismissal. Her gaze was fixed on the screen, not on the green icons, but on the faint shimmer of data lag at the edge of the display. She noted the refresh rate, the slight pixelation of the feed. It was a cheap system, prone to freezing, probably running on an unshielded civilian-grade cable. An insignificant detail, but it was the first of many she would collect. The meeting ended with another barrage of motivational rhetoric from Madsen. The officers filed out, buzzing with borrowed energy. Vance remained seated for a moment, letting the tent empty. The only other person who lingered was Master Sergeant Reyes, the senior NCO for the entire maintenance battalion. Reyes was a man weathered by 2 decades of desert deployments, his face a roadmap of sun and stress. He looked as tired as the sandblasted machinery in his motor pool. He approached her, his posture wary. "Specialist Vance," he said, his voice a low gravel. "Colonel's expecting you to start with the Stryker platoon. Lieutenant Davies will be your escort." "I'd rather start with you, Master Sergeant," Vance replied, her tone even and low. "And I'd rather walk the line without an escort. I work better when people aren't standing over my shoulder." Reyes considered her. There was no challenge in her voice, just a simple statement of fact. He'd seen 100 inspectors in his time. Some were box checkers, some were zealots looking to make a name for themselves. He couldn't place her. There was a stillness about her that was unusual for an E4. "All right," he said slowly. "My motor pool. Follow me." They stepped out of the tent into the blinding white sun of the afternoon. The air was thick with the smells of diesel, hot metal, and ozone from a nearby power generator. The motor pool was a sprawling city of canvas shelters and concrete hardstands, filled with the hulking shapes of armored vehicles. It was loud. The constant thrum of engines on test stands, the percussive clang of heavy wrenches on steel, the hiss of pneumatic tools. Reyes led her to the first vehicle, AM-1126 Stryker. "This is Alpha 1. Davies's ride. Just came out of a full service." Vance didn't pull out a checklist. She didn't even seem to look at the vehicle as a whole. Instead, her eyes went to the small things. She knelt, her fingers tracing the bead of a weld on the undercarriage armor. She ran a gloved hand over the hydraulic lines leading to the suspension, her touch light, searching. She paused at a large bolt head on the main drive axle. "This is a grade 5 bolt," she said, her voice barely audible over the noise. It wasn't a question. Reyes squinted at it. "It is. The technical manual specifies a grade 8 for this housing. Higher tensile strength." Reyes's jaw tightened. We're short on grade 8s. Supply chain's a mess. A grade 5 will hold. It'll hold on a paved road, Vance countered, still not looking at him. It'll shear under the torque stress of a high-speed maneuver in deep sand or mud, especially with the added weight of the new counter-IED package. She stood up and moved to the rear of the vehicle, her eyes scanning the power pack assembly. She pointed to a faint, dark stain on the concrete beneath the engine compartment. You've got a weeping gasket on the coolant pump. Slow leak. Not enough to show on a drip pan in a 4-hour check, but over a long patrol in this heat, the engine will overheat. The system will try to compensate, putting strain on the turbo. Best case, you lose power. Worst case, you throw a rod. Reyes was silent. He knew about the gasket. He had 3 vehicles with the same issue and only 1 replacement part. He'd logged it, but the logs, he knew, were being managed to reflect the colonel's desired readiness rate. They walked the line for 2 hours. It was the same story at every vehicle. Vance spoke in quiet, technical certainties. She identified mismatched wiring harnesses that could cause electrical fires, brake pads worn millimeters past their service limit, communications antennae with hairline fractures that would kill long-range comms in a sandstorm. She didn't make accusations. She just stated facts, her voice a calm river of data flowing against the rock of Madsen's 100%. With each observation, Reyes's wariness transformed into a grudging respect. This was not a box checker. She wasn't reading from a manual. The manual was ingrained in her. She saw the ghosts of future failures, the invisible cracks in the armor of their perfect record. The logs don't show any of this, he finally said, gesturing to a striker whose tires were visibly misaligned, a clear sign of a bent tie rod. The digital log on the mounted laptop showed all systems green. The logs show what the colonel wants them to show, Vance said. She tapped the screen of the laptop. This software is easy to manipulate. You can backdate entries, copy and paste service records. It's clean, but it's not right. Madsen's pushing for his star, Reyes grumbled, more to himself than to her. He thinks readiness reports are what get you promoted. He doesn't understand that the truth comes out one way or another. Usually the hard way. It always does, Vance agreed. Their tour was interrupted by the arrival of Lieutenant Davies, a young man whose ambition shone brighter than his butter bars. He was accompanied by a thick-necked sergeant first class named Thorne, a man who had molded himself into the colonel's enforcer. Master Sergeant, Davies said, his tone sharp. The colonel wants a word. Now he barely acknowledged Vance, dismissing her with a glance. The 4 of them walked to the makeshift command post, a metal container converted into an office. Colonel Madsen was behind his desk, his face a thundercloud. Reyes, he barked. Why is Alpha 4 still redlined? I was just informed by Sergeant Thorne that your people have it listed as non-mission capable. I want that vehicle green. Today. Reyes stood at a rigid parade rest. Sir, Alpha 4 has a cracked transfer case. We've welded it twice. The housing is fatigued. The next time it goes, it's not going to be a simple breakdown. It's going to come apart. We've had a new one on order for 6 weeks. I don't care about your excuses, Madsen snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. I care about my numbers. We have a major convoy operation scheduled in 48 hours. Every single vehicle will— Your respect is noted and irrelevant, Madsen cut him off. Your opinion is not required. Your compliance is. Lieutenant Davies, seeing his chance, stepped forward. Sir, we can get it done. The Master Sergeant is being overly cautious. My men are ready to roll. We can handle any challenge. Madsen beamed at the young officer. That's the attitude I'm talking about. See, Reyes? A can-do spirit. Make it happen. Thorne smirked at Reyes, a look of smug victory. He then turned his gaze to Vance, who had remained silent and observant in the corner. Yeah, well, observe this, Thorne sneered. We get the job done. No matter what. The pressure in the room was suffocating. It was a culture built on fear and ambition, where bad news was punished and loyalty meant lying. Vance saw the entire rotten structure of it, from the cheap projector cable to the cracked transfer case. It was a system waiting to fail. She said nothing. Her job, for now, was to watch, to listen, to document. Her silence seemed to inflame Thorne, but before he could say more, Madsen dismissed them with a wave. "Get it done. All of you out." As they walked back toward the motor pool, Reyes's shoulders were slumped in defeat. He knew the order was wrong. To disobey was to commit career suicide. "I have to do it," he said to Vance, though he wasn't looking at her. "I'll log my protest, but I have to give the order to my men." "You have to follow a lawful order," Vance corrected him quietly. "An order that needlessly endangers the lives of soldiers is not a lawful order." Reyes stopped and looked at her, truly looked at her. "Who the hell are you?" Vance just held his gaze. "I'm the specialist who told you that grade 5 bolt was going to shear." She walked away, leaving him standing in the swirling dust. She spent the rest of the day in a quiet corner of the maintenance bay, watching the mechanics work. She saw them pull Alpha 4 into the service area. She watched a young, nervous welder lay another thick, ugly bead over the fractured metal of the transfer case. They were good soldiers, following bad orders. They worked with a frantic, desperate energy, driven by the pressure from above. She saw Sergeant Thorne hovering over them, chivying them along, his presence a constant source of stress. As dusk fell, the sky to the west began to change. The usual pale blue bled into a sickly, bruised yellow. It arrived with a piercing shriek from the camp's warning sirens. A frantic voice crackled over the base-wide radio network. All call signs, stand to. I repeat, stand to. STARS reports enemy vehicle movement, 20 clicks east of Sector Gamma. All units prepare. Lieutenant Davies, his face a mask of adrenaline and pride, gave a thumbs up from the commander's hatch. Vance watched from the edge of the hardstand. She wasn't moving. She was listening. The first sign of disaster was a sound. A high-pitched, metallic scream that cut through the roar of the storm. It was immediately followed by a concussive bang, like a cannon shot. On the tactical display in the command post, Alpha 4's icon flashed red, then went dark. Through the swirling sand, they saw it. Alpha 4 had lurched to a halt just 50 yards from the main gate. The vehicle was canted at a sickening angle. The entire front wheel assembly on the driver's side had torn away. The transfer case hadn't just cracked. It had disintegrated, shredding drive shafts and hydraulic lines in the process. A fine mist of hydraulic fluid, atomized under thousands of pounds of pressure, sprayed over the hot engine block. The flash was instantaneous. A whoosh of orange flame enveloped the front of the Striker. The vehicle behind it, blinded by the sandstorm, didn't have time to react. There was a grinding crash of metal on metal as it slammed into Alpha 4's rear. A chain reaction followed. The third vehicle swerved to avoid the pileup, its tires sinking into the soft sand at the edge of the road, becoming instantly bogged down. The ECP, the only way in or out of the FOB, was completely blocked by a tangled, burning wreck. Panic erupted on the radio. "Contact! IED! IED at the ECP!" someone screamed. "Negative, that was not an IED," another voice yelled. "Alpha 4 is down. It's on fire. I've got casualties. We need medics." Colonel Madsen's voice cut through the chatter, shrill and indecisive. "What's happening? Somebody give me a report. Get the fires out. Clear that gate. Move, move, move." His orders were a stream of panicked noise, devoid of direction or clarity. Lieutenant Davies could be heard, his voice cracking with fear. "We're trapped in the vehicle. The hatch is jammed. The fire's spreading." The command post was a scene of paralysis. Officers stared at the screens, their faces pale. NCOs shouted into handsets, but no one seemed to be in control. The system, so perfectly green on Madsen's chart, had collapsed into total failure. Through it all, Vance moved. She didn't run. She walked with a calm, deliberate purpose that seemed to bend the chaos around her. Her first stop was the fire suppression station. She grabbed 2 large extinguishers, shoving one into the hands of a stunned-looking private. "With me," she said, her voice cutting through his panic. "Aim for the base of the fire." Short, controlled bursts. She moved toward the wreck, the wind and sand tearing at her. She saw Sergeant Thorne trying to organize a group of soldiers, but he was just shouting, adding to the confusion. He saw Vance moving with authority, directing the private, and his face twisted with rage. This was his turf, his moment of crisis to control. He stomped over to her, grabbing her arm. "Who the hell do you think you are? Specialist? Get back in your place. Let the real soldiers handle this." He punctuated his sentence with a hard shove, trying to push her back toward the buildings. It was a bully's move, meant to humiliate and assert dominance. Vance's response was fluid, economical, and brutally efficient. She didn't resist the push. She rode its momentum, turning with it, her body sinking slightly. As Thorne's balance shifted forward, her left hand came up, not to block, but to guide his arm, deflecting it past her body. Her right hand simultaneously shot out, not as a fist, but as a rigid blade, striking the radial nerve on the inside of his wrist. Thorne grunted in pain as a jolt of pure fire shot up his arm. His fingers went numb, his grip vanishing. Before he could recover, Vance pivoted. Her body was now inside his reach. She kept control of his right arm, twisting it slightly. Her left hand clamped down on his other wrist. She didn't use strength against strength. She used leverage and a precise understanding of anatomy. With a sharp, controlled pull in one direction and a push in the other, she applied a standing wrist lock. There was a series of distinct, sickening pops. Not loud, but audible over the wind to anyone nearby. It was the sound of small bones dislocating and ligaments tearing. Sergeant First Class Thorne screamed. It was a high, thin sound of agony and disbelief. His body folded, his knees buckling as both of his wrists became useless, dangling appendages. He collapsed to the ground, cradling his ruined hands, his face a mask of shock and pain. The entire exchange took less than 3 seconds. The soldiers around them, who had been running in circles, stopped dead. They stared, first at the whimpering NCO on the ground, then at the specialist who stood over him, her expression as calm and unreadable as it had been in the briefing. She hadn't broken a sweat. There was no anger in her eyes, no triumph. It was the detached efficiency of a machine disabling a malfunctioning part. She gave Thorne one last, dismissive glance. Then she turned her attention back to the real problem. She grabbed the fire extinguisher again and continued toward the burning striker as if nothing had happened. The moment of shock was broken when she keyed the handset on a nearby vehicle's radio, commandeering the local command net. Her voice, when it came over the air, was the antithesis of the panic and chaos that had ruled it moments before. It was calm, measured, and radiated an absolute, unshakable authority. "All call signs on this net, this is Erebus Actual. Cease all transmissions. Stand by for instructions." The designation Actual was reserved for the commander on the ground. For a specialist to use, it was unthinkable. But no one questioned it. The sheer confidence in her voice commanded obedience. Silence fell across the net. "Fire team, you have 2 burning vehicles. Focus on Alpha 4 first. Suppress the engine compartment to prevent a fuel cell explosion. Use foam. Rescue team, Lieutenant Davies reports his crew is trapped. The side hatch is jammed. Get a Halligan bar and a spreader. Pry the rear ramp. It's the faster entry point." She paused, listening to the wind, her mind processing the geometry of the wreckage. "Wrecker 1, you are our primary recovery asset. Do not approach the burning vehicles. Your job is to clear the 3rd vehicle, the one bogged in the sand. Use your main winch. Pull it backwards and clear a path. Once a lane is open, we can get emergency vehicles through. Medics, establish a casualty collection point at the motor pool command post. It's upwind from the smoke. Wait for my signal to move forward." Her orders were a masterclass in crisis management. They were precise, logical, and prioritized. She wasn't just shouting orders. She was deconstructing a complex problem into a series of simple, achievable tasks. She was creating order out of chaos. Master Sergeant Reyes, hearing her voice over his radio, felt a jolt of recognition. He didn't know who she was, but he recognized what she was: a leader. He keyed his own mic. "All maintenance personnel, you heard Erebus Actual. Get that wrecker moving now." Full power, his endorsement cemented her authority. His soldiers, who respected him above all others, complied instantly. The effect was immediate. The scattered, panicked soldiers now had direction. The fire team, armed with foam extinguishers, advanced on the blaze. A recovery team, tools in hand, sprinted toward the trapped crew. The massive wrecker roared to life, its heavy chains rattling as it positioned itself to pull the mired striker free. Vance stood in the heart of the storm, a still point in the turning world, directing the symphony of rescue. She coordinated the teams, her voice never rising, never betraying a hint of stress. She saw the vectors, the angles, the points of failure and success, all laid out in her mind. It took 17 minutes. 17 minutes to suppress the fire, extricate Lieutenant Davies and his crew, shaken and smoke-blackened but alive, and clear a path through the ECP. What had been a paralyzing disaster was now a managed scene. As the last of the flames were extinguished, two figures emerged from the command post, stumbling through the sand. It was Colonel Madsen and the base command sergeant major, a man named Peters. Madsen's face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fury. He saw Vance, standing near the wreck, speaking calmly into a radio handset. He saw his soldiers, his officers, all of them moving to the commands of this specialist. His authority had been usurped. His world had been turned upside down. He stormed toward her, his rage finally finding a target. "You!" he roared, his voice hoarse. "Who in the goddamn hell do you think you are? Impersonating a commander, issuing illegal orders. I'll have you court-martialed. You are finished, specialist." Vance turned to face him. She slowly unkeyed the radio's microphone. She didn't flinch from his tirade. She simply watched him, her expression unreadable. But before Madsen could continue, Command Sergeant Major Peters, who had been scanning the scene, froze. His eyes locked on Vance. His entire demeanor changed. The harried look on his face was replaced by one of instant, profound recognition. His back straightened. His posture shifted from that of a panicked NCO to one of formal military deference. He took 2 quick steps forward, placing himself between Vance and the still ranting colonel. "Colonel, stand down," Peter said, his voice a low, urgent command. Madsen stared at him, bewildered. "What did you say, Sergeant Major? Stand down?" "Sir," Peter said, his voice sharp now, cutting through Madsen's anger. He turned his body slightly to address Vance, his head giving a respectful dip. "Mum, my apologies. I was not aware you were on this FOB." The word ma'am hung in the air, heavier than any artillery shell. It was a form of address a command sergeant major would never, under any circumstances, use for a specialist. Madsen's mouth snapped shut. Confusion warred with indignation on his face. "Sergeant Major, what is the meaning of this? Have you lost your mind? This is Specialist Vance." Vance reached into the breast pocket of her uniform. She pulled out a simple, laminated identification card. She didn't shove it in Madsen's face. She just held it up, letting the emergency strobes from a nearby ambulance flash across its surface. Madsen squinted, his eyes tracing the lettering. He saw the name, Vance, Elara M. He saw the photo, and then he saw the rank insignia. It wasn't the single chevron of a specialist. It was a silver bar with 3 black blocks, the insignia of a Chief Warrant Officer 3. Beneath her name, her title was printed in stark, black letters: Technical Inspector, Office of the Inspector General, U.S. Army Material Command. The blood drained from Colonel Madsen's face. He looked as if he'd been punched in the gut. An Inspector General. Not some low-level box checker from Divisional, but a high-level investigator from the Army's top logistics command. A warrant officer, a technical expert of the highest caliber, operating under the direct authority of the Pentagon. They were legendary, ghosts in the system who moved quietly, observed everything, and whose reports could end careers with the stroke of a pen. They were the ones sent to find the truth when the numbers didn't add up. Madsen stumbled back a step. The loud, blustering authority he had wielded so freely just an hour ago evaporated into the sand-filled wind. He was no longer a colonel berating a specialist. He was a field-grade officer standing before a direct representative of the highest echelons of his service, and he had just been caught in a catastrophic lie of his own making. The burning, twisted metal behind Vance was his 100% readiness made real. I don't understand, he stammered, his voice a pathetic whisper. You understood the order to falsify your maintenance records, Vance said, her voice still quiet, but now it carried the immense weight of her true authority. You understood the order to use substandard parts. You understood the order to risk the lives of your soldiers for a bullet point on a slide. My understanding is not the issue here, Colonel. Lieutenant Davies, who had been helped from his vehicle, overheard the exchange. His face went white with horror, not from the fire he had just escaped, but from the sudden, sickening realization of his own complicity. His can-do attitude had been nothing but sycophantic poison. He had almost gotten his crew killed to impress a man who was now being silently dismantled before his eyes. Master Sergeant Reyes watched from a distance, a slow, grim satisfaction settling on his features. He looked at Vance, not with surprise, but with a deep, profound respect. He hadn't known who she was, but he had recognized what she was. Now he had a name for it. He gave a single, deliberate nod. It was a salute from one professional to another. The soldiers nearby, who had witnessed her takedown of Thorne and her flawless command during the crisis, now understood. The whispers started to move through the crowd. The quiet specialist was a ghost, a chief, an IG. The story would be legend by morning chow. Vance turned away from the shell-shocked colonel. Her attention was already back on the mission. She looked at Reyes. Master Sergeant, I need a full, unedited data dump from every vehicle's maintenance log for the past 90 days. The raw data, not the version on the colonel's slideshow. And I need a full inventory of your parts bay, cross-referenced with your supply requests. Yes, ma'am, Reyes replied without hesitation. It'll be on your desk in an hour. Thank you, Master Sergeant, she said. It was the first time she had offered him any warmth, a simple acknowledgement of his own integrity. She walked away from the scene of the wreck, leaving Madsen to be dealt with by the command sergeant major. She didn't look back. The fate of the colonel was a foregone conclusion, a matter of administrative process. Her job was to fix the underlying problem, to restore the system, to ensure this never happened again. Hours later, the FOB was quiet except for the mournful howl of the receding storm. The wreckage at the ECP had been cleared, the injured treated. The convoy had been cancelled. A pall of silent recrimination hung over the entire base. Vance was not in the command post writing her report. She was not on a satellite phone to her headquarters. She was alone in the cavernous maintenance bay, the one she had first walked through with Reyes. The harsh fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting long shadows. In her hands was a high-end digital torque wrench, one of the few pieces of equipment in the bay that seemed to be properly calibrated. With a soft, clean rag, she was meticulously wiping it down, removing every speck of dust and grease. Her movements were precise, economical, and focused. She cleaned the handle, the digital display, the socket head. It was a simple, repetitive task, a ritual. It was the act of a professional who, having been forced to deal with the chaos of broken men and broken policies, found solace in the simple, honest work of caring for her tools. This was her world, the place where things were either right or they were wrong, where tolerances were measured in thousandths of an inch, and where the truth could not be faked. Master Sergeant Reyes found her there. He walked up quietly, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He didn't speak for a long moment, just watched her work. They medevaced Thorne, he said finally. dislocated fractures in both wrists. The surgeon said it was the cleanest, most precise damage he'd ever seen. Said it looked like it was done by a machine. Vance didn't look up from the wrench. He'll have full mobility back in a few months. If he does his physical therapy. Reyes handed her one of the mugs, her fingers wrapped around the warm ceramic. That was a hell of a thing, Chief. All of it. It was a failure of leadership, she stated, as if diagnosing a faulty engine. The system did what it was designed to do. It failed. You didn't fail, Reyes said. Vance finally stopped her work. She placed the perfectly clean wrench into its foam-cut slot in the toolbox, securing it with a soft click. She looked around the vast, silent bay, at the rows of armored vehicles that were her life's work. They were more than machines to her. They were a trust, a promise made to the soldiers who rode them into harm's way. "The job's not done yet, Master Sergeant," she said, taking a sip of the coffee. "It's never done." He just nodded, understanding completely. They stood in silence for a while, two quiet professionals in a world of noise, drinking their coffee under the steady, unwavering hum of the fluorescent lights. The storm outside had passed. The real work of rebuilding had just begun.